It's time to get nerdy, y'all.
A little bit of gaming history for you.
Something relevant in gaming and discuss our opinions on it.
Should we kick it out of here, or should we kickstart it?
This is the part where you, the listeners, try to stump the hosts.
I'm not a lawyer. I just play one on a podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, lads and lasses of all ages, welcome to the show. It is Tuesday, December 17th, 2024, and it is time to get nerdy. Welcome to episode 327 of Two Nerds in a Pod, the nerdiest gaming podcast in the multiverse. I am Mac, and I am joined by my co-host, a fellow nerd, a connoisseur of comedy. He's not just the first option, he's also the best option, name of his comedy special, Mr. Lam Galuka, also known as Mr. Nice Guy 425, and for the next hour we're going to cover topics about video gaming as they relate in the spheres of news, history, trivia, lawsuits, and everything in between. But first, Mr. Nice Guy, it's been a couple of weeks, how you doing, man?
Dude, I'm doing so good. What is new? So traveled to Seattle last week for work, and then I grew up about 20 minutes outside the city. So hung out with some family and just had a blast. Now, I took my love of laser tag with me to Seattle and did some laser tag with my brother and had a blast at some place called Laser X Arena. I believe it was in Kirkland, Washington. And had a really good time. Great group of people out there. Not too competitive, but fairly competitive. So that was fun. And we did our annual Christmas party the weekend before that. So the nice guy, nice girl, nice family Christmas party was a blast as always. I think we had 60 or 70 people, smoked up some wings, did some homemade donuts, had some conversation, and you know, it's a mix and mingle. It's your typical suburban party. We had a blast. It was a lot of fun. Other than that, Mac, not much new. What's new with you?
Well, you know, I think the newest thing is that I recently stumbled upon this recipe for sweet pork that I particularly enjoy.
Nice.
Now, when we were both living in the southern Utah area and, you know, became friends, there was a sort of, I guess, a smaller-sized chain restaurant called Cafe Rio that had this sweet pork that I just loved, as sweet pork burritos. Anyway, I've recently been trying it out myself, and I think I'm getting close to the special sauce. And yeah, so like earlier today, you know, did a few pounds of pork, that stuff marinated, you know, so anyway, I'm just really pleased with how close I'm able to get. It's given me a taste of home and a taste of, taste of the familiar, which is really, really comforting in these times of short days and cold evenings. So that's about the new stuff that I've got going on. Of course, I live a very, very uninteresting life.
You live a
Not
great
like
life.
you, sir.
Dude, that's awesome. You ever heard that phrase that the kids say when they say let him cook? Like when not literal cooking, but like when someone's doing something.
Yeah.
Like they're like, say they go on a kill streak in a video game.
Yeah.
Or say someone is like playing basketball and they're like shaking and baking and they're breaking ankles. They're doing things and they're like, let him cook. Mac, literally, with you trying to perfect this episode, I gotta say, let him cook. Let this boy cook and create the often imitated, never duplicated, but soon to be duplicated sweet pork from Cafe Rio, Southern Utah. And I've got to taste it when you come out for a visit.
Oh, I'll absolutely make it when I come out for a visit. Looking forward to that. But, Mr. Nice Guy, that's about all that's new in my life.
Why don't we do what we do best? And you tell the joke that you were going to tell that you mentioned to me before the podcast, and now you're being shy. Comedy is about failure and success and testing boundaries, and I want to hear this joke.
Okay, so no, it's just the joke was going to be that I've been playing Skyrim a bit lately, and it's been I've been very much like making a joke about Skyrim for many years.
Yeah.
And so it's really growing on me and surprising me in ways I didn't expect.
A new hand touches the beacon.
Oh, just the voices again. Just the voices.
On that note, Mac, I say, why don't we do what we do best? A close second to telling jokes about Skyrim, but we talk about that gaming news. What do you think about that?
Let's do it. Mr. Nice Guy, what's new in video gaming?
So much. Let's talk about it, ladies and gentlemen. Episode 327 of Two Nerds in a Pod is a go. So much to talk about, Mac. This first news story, it was probably going to make you happy. It's by Chris Brandick from overkill.wtf, not a site we often source from, but they have an interesting story about Nintendo. Last month, we shared a news of a streamer and YouTuber who was alleged to have repeatedly shared gameplay footage of several pre-release first-party Nintendo games. The somewhat brass-faced individual in question, a Jesse Keighin, known online as Every Game Guru, found themselves facing legal action from Nintendo of America. The only issue for Nintendo? He's avoided being served. The Switch maker put in a legal challenge against the streamer with the U.S. District Court in early November, stating that Keighin's repeated streaming of pre-release software on the likes of YouTube and Twitch was harmful to Nintendo and in turn promoted piracy, such as via emulation tools Yuzu and Ryujinx. However, over a month on now, and it seems Nintendo's having trouble getting the guy to actually engage with the lawsuit. Mac, we don't need to be redundant. We don't need to keep reading what's happening here. This guy is avoiding being served.
Mm-hmm.
I'm more curious about your thoughts on the fact that he streamed these games pre-release, and if we believe that hurts sales.
That is one of the things that we talked about in the last episode, in episode 326 for legalese, and I don't know. I don't honestly think that it harms, that pre-release streaming harms sales. We already get mostly enough information about what a game's going to be like before we purchase it, unless we've pre-ordered. I guess you could make the argument that, like, some people decided not to pre-order because they saw what was being streamed and realized it wasn't for them.
Right.
But that would just be a situation where you would be getting those returned to you, if you have a return option in the first place, as they discovered it wasn't for them in the first place.
Well, maybe, because I mean, if they opened the game, they couldn't.
True, probably.
But if they did it on Steam and they played for less than 2 hours or something.
The real damage done to Nintendo is the people who bought the game, but turns out they don't like it and would have returned it if Nintendo of America allowed them to return it, but they don't. So Nintendo is out the people that they arguably cheated. I mean, it's hard to say because it's not like Nintendo tried to cheat people, but like literally those are the only people to whom this is damaging the proceeds, is the people who it turns out have buyer's remorse.
Yeah, my head hurts.
And if they had better information.
But no, like, here's the thing. I don't know that this hurts sales. I'm not a fan of buying pirated games. Certainly not a fan of playing them online. If we preach that video games are art, and I know that we do, then the people who put all of the time and potentially the crunch, not that we're fans of crunch, but those crunch hours into building a game, deserve for their audience to be able to experience it for the first time at release. And if those people choose to then realize it, or rather visualize it, enjoy it via YouTube or Twitch or some other streaming service, that's fine. I think back to The Last of Us Part 2 when that came out during 2020, and it basically leaked in advance that Joel was going to die. One of the main characters, one of the most beloved characters from the first game, the protagonist, one of the main characters, right? People still went out and bought the game because one part of a game, even the ending, knowing it in advance, I don't believe can ruin the whole story and ruin the experience. Spoilers suck and it's frustrating, but the journey and the friends we made along the way are just as much an important part of a big spoiler in a game.
Agreed.
I mean, Mac, you have thoughts on this guy avoiding the lawsuit? It's not really gaming related, but I'm just...
It's definitely relevant since we talked about it last week, but, like, yeah, avoiding the lawsuit, it is... You can, after you've shown your best efforts to serve and come up short, you can, in certain circumstances, proceed. It depends on the venue, the type of lawsuit, as anything, it depends. But yeah, it will be interesting to see. I don't know, I wonder how long he can effectively duck it. Mostly because it feels like in this day and age, you're more easily findable if somebody really puts a time to it, an eye to it. But I don't know. Maybe this guy, maybe Keighin's got himself, a cabin in the woods with a couple VPNs, bouncing the signal all over the country, a la Robert Redford Sneakers style. Who knows?
Well, let's move on, Mac. The Game Awards happened last week.
They did.
They did, and I'm curious, did you follow any of the winners, any of the announcements? Like, was there anything that stood out to you?
So, no. You could probably actually tell me anybody had won, and I would be like, what? They won? That was cool. I don't even know who won for most of the categories.
This was, in my mind, one of the least exciting game awards outside of the announcements. Like in terms of the winners, I just didn't. There weren't a lot of the Game of the Year games that really resonated with me this year, as much as there have been in years past. But there were several awesome announcements that I'm excited for, and that I'm excited for you to play, because I know that, you know, we talk often on the stream about, or on the podcast, about how you are more of a retro gamer. You play a certain type of game. But you do have the Steam Deck, and so you do have now access to some of those AAA or AA titles.
I've got options
that are coming out. This boy has options. So here's some of the announcements that got me excited. The first one is Intergalactic: The Heretic Prophet. The final announcement, this is from GameSpot.com, by the way. I'll find the author's name in just a moment. The final announcement came from Naughty Dog, which is moving from The Last of Us to a new IP, Intergalactic: The Heretic Prophet. The brief teaser trailer showed a conversation between a bounty hunter and her handler, who gives her a new target that looks suspiciously like Kumail Nanjiani, who is a stand-up comedian and a great actor. Mac, I'm curious your thoughts, like, just generally. You know, Naughty Dog has done the Uncharted series. They've kind of ended it. They've done The Last of Us Part 1 and Part 2. I think that people generally like 3s. I think it's interesting that they're moving on to a new IP rather than working on The Last of Us Part 3.
They're just following in the footsteps of Valve, Mr. Nice Guy.
Yeah, you think so? Can't do 3?
Allergic to 3s. I mean, I wonder if it was, and it's like kind of superstitious, but like, you know, there were people would stop after a certain amount of symphonies because they're like, oh, can't make a fifth symphony that would, then I'll die or whatever. So, you know, for symphonies, it's 5, 6 or whatever it was in classical music. For video games, it's 3.
Well, as a counterpoint to that, and before I dive into that, let me just say I'm very excited for this game, because everything Naughty Dog puts out ends up being awesome. I love The Last of Us, and I'd love to get a Part 3, and I would have loved to get The Last of Us multiplayer. But I get moving on to new stuff. And it's interesting because last week, Spennis and I had talked, and I think we mentioned it on the pod 2 weeks ago, about how it's harder to come out with a new AAA title right now. Unless you are, I think I said, unless you are like Naughty Dog or Rockstar. Even Bethesda struggled with their recent attempt. So it's interesting that after I said that, now Naughty Dog has announced this, and I'm excited. Now, speaking to your point about 3s and them not being, you know, well received or not often coming in the gaming world, we did get The Witcher 4 was announced, and Borderlands 4 was announced. Now, I don't know, have you played The Witcher 3, Matt?
I've not played it. However, I have been present in the physical space for somebody else who I like to, you know, to play it. So, like, I've seen parts of The Witcher 3 being played, and it seemed really cool.
The Witcher 3 is a game that I think you would love. And you know what we should do, Mac? Do a 2 Nerds Christmas. We should buy each other a game, $10 limit.
Okay.
Or something like that. I don't know if I'll do The Witcher 3. And we should buy a game maybe that's not looking at each other's wish list.
Cool.
And we should say, just based on what I know of you, I think you will like this game.
Okay.
And we should gift them to each other Christmas Eve, Christmas Day.
Awesome. I am 100% on board. I already know what I'm getting you.
Yeah, I think $10 is like the perfect sweet spot of getting a game that is going to be good, but maybe not overwhelming, or maybe it will be overwhelming. And I'm going to stop talking because I don't want to influence your decision. But I'll find something for you in that $9.99, $10 range, and we'll gift them to each other.
Awesome. I'm excited for this exchange.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. New tradition. So anyway, and I mentioned that because Witcher 3 is often $10. And I think
okay.
Well, cool. But hey, we're also getting a new Elden Ring game. Elden Ring Night Rain from Software followed CD Projekt's Red surprise announcement with a surprise of its own. Elden Ring Night Rain's debut trailer showed multiple tarnished fighting against massive bosses across the lands between. Super interesting that we have gotten so much Elden Ring stuff from that initial release. And by the way, this is written by Jason Finelli, this Game Awards announcement. And we'll leave it at that. Shout out to those who won. We're not going to spend too much time on that. Everyone knows who they are at this point. But I am very excited for the announcements that we've discussed today and love that the medium's moving forward.
Did we hear anything about Silk Song?
No, we didn't, Mac. We did not.
Dang it.
And that's the funny thing. I saw someone commentate online. We've gotten Elden Ring. We've gotten the Elden Ring DLC. And then we now have a third Elden Ring thing mentioned. And we still have not heard anything new about Silk Song. Since it was announced, I don't even know what year. 2021? Something like that.
2022 was revealed in June.
Dude, the original Hollow Knight came out in 2017. And it's probably still in my top 5. It's one of those ones that I perpetually say, I gotta replay this. It was awesome. And so I need to pick it up for Steam Deck. But anyway, I digress. Mac, last news story. I don't know how far in we are time-wise. We might even just call it on news. Yeah, let's just call it on news.
Okay.
Steam Awards are going to happen soon. Check those out. That's been our news for the week.
Oh, yeah, and don't forget the Steam Summer Sale. Winter Sale? Has it happened yet?
Does that start now? I thought it started on the 19th. We just came off of a sale, but
Yeah.
they're going to have another one for the holidays.
Yeah. So be on the lookout, and for you and I, that might give us a chance to actually nail that $10 gift. So
That's the perfect time.
now we take a little look into the past with some video game history. So this last week, or since it's been a couple of weeks, these last couple of weeks have seen some notable things in video game history. And a lot of it has to do with 1993, believe it or not. I'll knock a couple of others out of there. I think it's important to note that 2014 on the PC, we saw the release of Subnautica, a fantastic game. Lom, have you played it?
I have not played it, but I know that you were gifted it a while back, and you seem to think very highly of it.
Yeah, I do. I think it's pretty darn great. Very much a sort of survival game, but it really kind of played with some tropes in that almost all of it occurs mostly underwater. And they really do a good job of making this sort of terrifying sea area. And just as soon as you kind of have more or less got yourself squared away so that it's just okay, I'm not scared of the little sharks in the shallows areas anymore, then you start really going, you get to the iceberg, you get below the surface, and there's so much more going on and so much more there. And it's really fantastically well done. And in the interest of not spoiling anything, I'll just say it's a good game. 10 out of 10, recommend.
10 out of 10. Okay, nice.
Oh, yeah. Very, very good. Let's see. Oh, yeah. Streets of Rage 2 in 2001 for the Sega Genesis. Fantastic game. Great take on the fighter. But back to 1993. It would have been December, early December. In 1993, we had the congressional hearings on video game violence. Now, Mr. Nice Guy, I actually, in prep for this evening, I went back and I watched it was hard to get the full entire video. I don't know what I was doing wrong and why I couldn't find it. The best I could find was actually a compilation that only lasted about 2 hours of some of the highlights of the congressional hearings. It must have happened longer, but anyway, those of you who may not have seen it yourselves, basically there was a lot of talk about how these violent video games were causing troubles. Presumably, one senator's friend had a son who was just like, "Hey, Dad, can you go get Mortal Kombat on the Sega Genesis for me instead of the Super Nintendo, because the Sega Genesis has more blood, and that's what I want. I want blood." And then all these adults started freaking out. It included people coming to the front to talk about. They asked questions, often very pointed and accusatory questions of people from Nintendo of America. They held up the console version, which for then would have been the Genesis, of the game Lethal Enforcers, which had, kind of like the you remember the arcade. It had a big plastic, huge revolver, like Dirty Harry type revolver, big thing.
Yep.
And on the console side of things, the release for that light gun was called the Justifier. And of course, we had previously for the Sega the Menacer. The Nintendo had things like the bazooka. What was that called? Oh gosh.
Oh, the Super Scope.
The Super Scope. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Man,
For
can't believe I
SNES.
forgot that. But yeah, they both very much were just like, how dare you, Sega, have these guns? You're teaching our children terrible things. And then there's the Sega guy who's just like, well, they've got a bazooka, so that's a thing. And then the senators are just like, well, I think it's all way too realistic anyway. I mean, to think, super realistic. But it also had features from fantastic things, such as a game called Night Trap, which was a full-motion video game. We've kind of mentioned it before, but Night Trap was a game where you essentially had control of a house's security system and trap system, and you were trying to keep vampires away from the people inside of the house. And so they showed this big thing about how could you make a video game that depicted vampires. Of course, in this case, it wasn't like, traditional, like, I want to suck your blood type vampires.
Right.
But it was like vampires that they had like a claw on a stick that presumably, that drilled in and sucked people's blood, and they harvested it that way. So like slightly more grotesque, but nonetheless, it was very much this game that it's like, and the people said, they're like, hey, so real talk, children aren't buying these games. Like, overwhelmingly it's adults who are buying these Sega CD games, but okay, point taken. We're also trying to tell people it's not for young children, but also the point is the point's to save the people, not to let the bad things happen. And if you just want to cut every single piece of bad stuff that happens in a video game or any kind of media, every time a punch is thrown in an action movie and you just put all those punches up there, well, sure, now it's a movie about punching, but, it was never an art about that before, so come on, guys. Anyway, it's definitely interesting, and it had some far-reaching impacts, of course. Perhaps one of the most notable ones was that in that hearing, Nintendo of America swore that Night Trap would never be sold on their consoles. Of course, I'm not holding them to that because I think it was a couple years ago that they started selling Night Trap on the Switch.
Sure.
So, I mean, I don't know as I'm going to hold them to that 3 decades on, but, it is interesting. But it did indeed have a few more impacts because stores, the biggest ones, which would have been like KB Toys and Toys R Us back in those days, the next week, citing, of course, the hearings in 1993, they pulled Night Trap from the store shelves, and many places stopped selling them. I think Night Trap only sold about 250,000 copies, and a lot of that was an uptick right at the end because of the controversy. I think a few people were probably disappointed when they found out it wasn't quite the gore fest that the Senate hearings made it out to be. But nonetheless, success de scandale, perhaps? Who knows? It was also funny and not at all planned that id Software released Doom like the day after the hearings on video games, which if Doom had been released before those hearings, you better believe they would have included Doom.
Oh, you know it. You know it.
As is, it feels like Mortal Kombat's a little tame. Lethal Enforcer is a bit tame. Even Night Trap is a touch tame when you put it up against Doom. It was a big deal, and in 93, that was kind of the start of the little moral panic. And you see this a lot, whether it's video games or whatever. Usually it's, something that is either completely untrue or, if you squint and turn your head to the side in a certain light, maybe it has the effect of something or the sound of truthiness. But nonetheless, people,
for sure.
lose their minds about it. While that's not the only thing that's happened this last week, I think the 1993 congressional hearings on video games are objectively probably the most impactful things that happened in video games this last week in December. Sure, we got some good games, but it's hard to know how things would have developed differently. Because at the end of this, the real big decision and the big take-home from them all was, hey, if you guys don't figure out a way, you, the video game companies, don't figure out a way to, like, keep these young ones moral after school, then we're gonna have to do something. And at the time, in 93, video games were not considered to be an act of expression. They were not considered to be art. They were not protected. That wasn't until, late in the 20-teens. So it is one of those situations where they absolutely could have, at the time, done it. But yet, the Entertainment Software Merchants Association, whichever alphabet soup version of things, they got together, they made their ratings, and that at least seemed to pacify the people on Washington enough so that we kept video games as not being banned by congressional acts. Now, they wouldn't have banned a lot, but sure we can think of a few titles that they would have objected to.
GTA San Andreas with that hot coffee mod that I've heard about?
Oof,
probably would have been banned.
Absolutely. So it is interesting to think, was this a good thing? Was it a bad thing? Putting them on notice that what people wanted to do was to enact laws to bar certain video games and saying, hey, get your rating system so that we don't have to. Who knows? Who knows how it could have worked out differently? But I will say I think it did work out for the best, in spite of some delightful one-liners, which, if you've got an hour, go back, watch some of the greatest hits. There's some fun moments in there.
Fun moments. Well, thank you for sharing that, Mac. And coming up next is our Topic of the Week, a segment where we discuss something relevant in gaming and give our opinions on it. And Mac, I'm not going to lie, I'm excited for January. Because as much as I love talking about Topic of the Week, I love reviewing indie games. And as much as we need a break to not have to do that, because it's fun, but it takes time, I'm missing it. I'm missing those indies. So if you're an indie company, or if you're one of our listeners, and you know an indie that's upcoming in January that we should review, let us know. We'd love to check it out. But Mac, today we're reading a story from Kotaku. This is written by Ethan Gack, and here is what he says. Microsoft's newest sales pitch to prospective gamers is that everything, your TV, your computer, or phone, can be an Xbox. It's part of a new strategy aimed at reaching more people and potentially making a lot more money. It's also a major shift for the millions of people who have been Xbox fans for decades now, and the company says it's embracing them. Quote, if I think about it right, we choose the secular growth category in entertainment, which we think is gaming, and said, let's double down on it, Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella said at an investor conference last week. GameFile reports. Quote, and so we said, let's take that joy of gaming everywhere. And that's why even these ads with Xbox Now, where we are redefining what it means to be an Xbox fan, it's about being able to enjoy Xbox on all your devices. That line we're redefining means what it means to be an Xbox fan might play well with shareholders, but it's a potential tinderbox for longtime players unsure what exactly that means for them. Mac, we're not going to read the whole article, but I think you get the gist of what he's saying, which is something that is not a surprise to people like you and me, because with things like Xbox Cloud streaming, you can play Xbox games on your Steam Deck over the cloud. You can play them on your TV with a controller. You can play them on your iPad or your tablet with a controller. You don't need the physical Xbox console to enjoy Xbox Game Pass or even to enjoy Xbox games like Halo that is now free to play for the multiplayer. Do we get another Xbox? Or do they just fully embrace that there's no need for one?
So, obviously, most of the video game studios are a little closed-mouthed about exactly what their costs are on a lot of things. But I think we've got enough data points to say that most of the console manufacturers lose some money or don't make that much money on the consoles themselves. Does that seem fair, Mr. Nice
That's
Guy?
fair, and they make it back on the hardware and accessories probably.
Yeah.
Or, excuse me, they make it back on the software and accessories and things like that.
Yeah, probably. I think we're all, in that boat. So it doesn't sound like a bad idea to go, well, maybe we get rid of one of the things that's weighing us down, or that isn't really bringing profits. But it also seems, I don't know, I feel kind of like it's short-sighted, throwing the baby out with the bathwater, if you know what I mean.
How so?
Well, to some extent, I feel like, do you make as much money? Do you capture as much revenue if you no longer have the games being released on your platform that wind up coming back to you? I mean, in the case of Xbox, maybe you do if you own almost literally every other publisher and game dev studio out there. So maybe if you buy them all and you own them all, then it doesn't matter. So, I mean, do we get another Xbox? I don't know. Maybe not. That certainly seems to be the way that they've been leaning, is, hey, if we buy all the game studios, now it doesn't matter if they're buying on our platform anymore or not. We get paid no matter what. So, maybe not. Do you think we see another Xbox, Mr. Nice Guy?
It seems like you're kind of on the fence. I'm going to go and I'm going to say definitively no. We don't get another Xbox. If we do, it would be an extremely forced piece of hardware with a value proposition that doesn't really appeal to anyone other than people who have just become habitual Xbox purchasers. Because the value prop for Xbox right now is it's two things. Number one, it's the most powerful game. Mm-hmm. Number two is that it has Halo. I mean, I don't know. I'm being a little facetious here, but you can play every Xbox game somewhere else. There's nothing, and I mean, they acknowledge that. They say Xbox everywhere. Your console, your PC, your TV, your tablet. And also, the sales are so much worse than PlayStation. They really don't have the number of exclusives that they used to have. Mm-hmm. I don't want to just trash Xbox. Quick Resume is a dope feature that lets you hop in and hop out of your games really quickly. Mm-hmm. But once upon a time, Xbox Live was a major feature that now everyone, short of Nintendo, has incorporated something similar. Mm-hmm. Game Pass is amazing and is probably still the best deal in gaming. And I believe that next gen, they simply embrace that and they don't put out a box that has poor sales compared to its competitors.
From a practical standpoint, yeah, they probably definitely want to move that way. From a preservation standpoint, I'm very sad about the prospect because I think it'll just be easier and quicker to have games get lost by the wayside. I don't know. I hope that we still get that, but maybe I'm just living in the past. Luddite Mac over here, unwilling to change with the times.
It's interesting, Mac. So by day, and I know that you know this, I work in a financial industry. And nothing we say on here is financial advice, but just to use a quick analogy, like when I was managing money back in the day, there's a couple different ways that you can generate revenue. You can do it by selling a product to someone that has a big upfront sales charge. And then once they've paid that one-time thing, they're done and they don't really pay anything else. Or you can sell something to someone that has recurring revenue, where you continuing to provide them a service, their account is managed, whatever it may be, and each year they pay a percentage of the profits to their financial advisor. For that advice, Xbox no longer needs to do those big upfront charges. That $500 console, that's a one-time thing. They really need to focus on the recurring revenue, which is the Game Pass subscriptions, and that's what they are doing, and that is better for them in the long term than someone buying a box one time. Maybe they buy a couple other games over the few years, but ultimately, that Game Pass is where the money is.
True. And Mr. Nice Guy, I'm old-fashioned. I understand completely why this is a good plan for Microsoft and why they want to go that way. And do I hold it against them? No, kind of, maybe a little bit. I think what I hold most against any of this is the fundamental underlying imbalance of power. because it's like, as customers, we might want something. As game developers, they might want something else. And as game publishers, they want something else instead. But the only person who really ever gets a say is the publisher, not really either the customer or the dev. And I feel like the more we shift toward the service model, the live service model that so many video games are going, the more that gets, I feel like, even more imbalanced. Even if it's just from a sort of willingness, the Overton window, that shifts and people are more likely to accept it as fine. But, like I said, old-fashioned, I'm a Luddite. I'd be going in there down with this sort of thing, It's just kind of that.
Microsoft, no stranger to antitrust lawsuits, so they're purchasing these up. But you better bet your bottom dollar that their lawyers are prepared for someone to say you have a monopoly.
Indeed, and they've got more than enough money to make that go away, sadly, especially if the FTC doesn't do much about it. But, hey.
But that has been our news for the week.
All right, well, now we turn to a crowdfunding project that's trying to get off the ground. We call this Kick or Kickstart. And Mr. Nice Guy, I'm not going to mince words, because we've talked about these guys in the past. It's becoming almost a tradition. A Christmas tradition? Who knows? For Mac to mention Wormwood. So if you want a, crafted gaming table, modular they call it, then what you're looking for at this Kickstarter is a $250 down payment, Mr. Nice Guy, so that you can pay between $2,000 and $4,000 on the low end, or $2,500 to $5,500, depending upon the wood, with, of course, additional add-ons for those modular features that make this a modular table. Now, we've talked about these guys before, and this one is a touch more transparent about what the tables will cost, instead of being quite as cagey as some of the previous Kickstarters, where it was just like, oh, hey, I don't know, build up what features you want in our app and see, but give us your money down so that you reserve your spot in line. That seems a little bit more transparent, because in the reward tiers, they actually do say, like, oh, if you want it in rustic cherry, it'll be $2,000. If you want it in dark walnut, it'll be $4,000 or such like that. So some good transparency, some improvements on their side. But also in the Kickstarter, it says that delivery on all of these is January 2025.
Ridiculous. Ridiculous.
Exactly. It's never happening, and I object. Now, in general, I've said it before, and I'll say it again, that if you're famous, I don't want you gumming up the indie scene. I don't want to see CD Projekt Red showing up in the Indie Games Showcase, and I don't want Wormwood on Kickstarter. These guys have insane presence, and they, have been around for a while. But not only that, insult to injury, Mr. Nice Guy, they've run this campaign multiple times on Kickstarter. And every time it's been successful, so, good for them, I guess, but every time it's the same thing. Give us money to save your spot in the queue, and then you can order your stuff. Never mind that they haven't fulfilled a chunk of orders from the previous Kickstarter. For example, last year, I put them on blast, I guess, for everybody who was listening, when they ran their third GM Screen Kickstarter, having only fulfilled 75% or so of their previous GM Screen Kickstarter.
Unacceptable.
So it really feels like their pitch in these Wormwood Kickstarters is just act now or you'll never be able to wait in line. And the more Wormwood keeps running the same Kickstarter, the more I just keep thinking about pyramid schemes. No project is complete before they are pushing a new one. And in their updates, they regularly cite as like a point of pride, oh, we've got millions of pre-made components sitting in the warehouse right now that we've not shipped out yet. Or like I remember seeing a video where one dude there is saying something like, the warehouse is at capacity. And then they're launching Kickstarter projects to get thousands of new orders into the hopper. This is the 5th time, I want to say, that they've done the modular table Kickstarter. since like 2022. So they've done it like 5 years. And in some of these, it's the exact same like graphics and information on these Kickstarters. And I just feel like, nice guy, I'm not even going to be like, oh, I'm not even going to pretend like I don't have an opinion made up about this. Kick this. Support a small creator the way Kickstarter was meant to be used. Do not support Wormwood via Kickstarter. Don't participate in this farce. It only encourages them to keep doing it.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I don't know if I'm as passionate in my dislike of Wormwood as you are. But what I guess the thing that there's a few things that frustrate me is number one, they're trying to be a catch-all for tables. So like you can eat charcuterie on it, but you can also play Dungeons and Dragons. Like that's what a table does, right? You can use it for many, many things.
But Mr. Nesky, have you considered a table for eating on? With plates and cups? Have you considered pouring a glass of wine, Mr. Nice Guy?
Right.
Because I know that features in the gift.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Like they're making it seem like they created the table, and that you should be impressed with the fact that it can be used for more than one thing. When
it's
really,
true.
It's absurd the way that they're marketing this.
I mean, thank goodness that Steve Jobs is not at the helm at them. Otherwise, maybe they would be suing people for copying the look and feel of the table. Who knows?
Right? It's wild. So I think whoever invented the table should actually sue them for copyright infringement. But that's just me. I'm sure someone patented the table at one point. Mac, to take more orders when you have not fulfilled your previous orders is absurd. And I think that capitalizing on FOMO is also absurd because that's what's happening here.
Yeah.
Right. Anytime I see something where someone says you're buying this for the right to later purchase something else, I'm immediately skeptical. And so given these folks' track record, I think it's absurd. Now, I mean, let's not be completely negative because would you admit that what they're putting out is a good product?
I've never seen one of them myself, although I've heard a lot of people talk about them in social meds, and people do seem to like them when they get them. But yeah, I have though seen just as much negativity about their products, like, delays especially, as I have seen positivity on people like, oh my gosh, I think my first experience, my first experience, air quotes, with them was, I believe they got on my radar when like Critical Role did did an advertisement on Critical Role. But yeah, so I have no firsthand experience. It's just all he said, they said at this point.
I used to do this joke about this product called the Smart Mop, and it was a real commercial.
Love that joke.
Yeah, where like in the commercial, the guy's like, with the Smart Mop, you can clean up this spilled soda, and then you can wring it back in the glass, and it's ready to drink all over again. Infomercials like that, where people are creating problems that really don't exist, and then offering a solution is exactly what I see with this. Because several times in the video for this table that I watched while you were talking, they show a kid like spilling a soda or coloring on it, and then someone like takes a paper towel and cleans the soda up off the table. And I'm like, that's not because you created a special type of table. That's just because that's what people do when they spill something, is they wipe it up or they clean it off. Like, that's how life works. You clean up messes. Don't use that as a benefit of what you're selling.
Also, congratulations, you successfully sealed the wood. Something I could do.
Yeah. Right. Well, Mac, for the sake of time, I mean, my obvious answer is that this should be king.
Yeah, 100% agreed.
But do we wish them the best like we wish everyone the best, or do we not?
Oh, Lom, why do you have to put me in this case?
I mean, we're all about positivity here, right?
Sure, we wish everybody the best. It's unfortunate that Wormwood's continued and repeated flagrant abuses of Mac's goodwill, isn't going to win out this time. But good luck to everybody.
Well, now it's time for Nerd Flex.
Woohoo!
A segment where you, the viewers, try to stump the host. Sometimes you do, sometimes you do not. And often we have a special segment like we do today.
Indeed, because this is a sound test episode. Every fourth episode, we have a mystery sound for you. It's a sound from somewhere, somewhen, somehow in video gaming, and we put it on you to correctly identify it. But if you do, and you identify this episode, episode 327, with the correct answer on social medias, then we will gift you with a prize, handcrafted and sent to your door. So, listen up, and good luck. You'll need it.
All right, well, let's keep it moving. So if you're here live, you have a job to do. Get a multiple-choice gaming-related question in the chat. Mac and I will use nothing but our noggins to try to answer. But oftentimes, our viewers are a little bit shy, so we resort to our randomly generated test bank of questions, and that is where we will start today. Mac, the first question just happens to be a special round.
Woo-woo!
Name 2. It's funny, it says name 2, so if we name more than 2, do we get it wrong?
No. The point of the special round is as many as we can, but we need to do at least 2.
Okay, so name 2 point-and-click video games. I can think of several. You go first.
Day of the Tentacle. Kathy Rain. Let's see, there's a whole set of games in the Quest for Glory series, so I'll put those 3 down, Mr. Nice Guy, over to you, and I've got some more.
Telltale games. Telltale Walking
Yeah.
Dead. Wolf Among Us is another Telltale game that's point-and-click. A third one, and I don't know if this will show up on the list, is Super Mario Paint. There was that fly swatting game. I don't know if anyone here has ever heard of that or played that, but it used the Super Nintendo mouse accessory. That's definitely a point-and-click game.
Let's see. Full Throttle, The Dig, what was it, Rama or Rendezvous with Rama? Let's see. There are a couple other like point-and-click games essentially that they put on the 3DO that are coming to mind. But yeah.
Would we consider games like League of Legends or like Age of Empires to be point-and-click? Because technically, you're pointing, you're clicking.
Good question.
You're pointing and you're clicking.
I believe that while the interface is similar, point-and-click games are more meant to be like a single character. You move them by pointing and clicking rather than groups or combats. Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis, an amazing game.
What about games like a Project Zomboid? Would that be a point-and-click or not?
When they make me arbiter of game genres, I will have the answers for you. I will set it down in law. But until then, I think that's just a wobbler.
Yeah, for now, let's see what they got. Okay, so there's a lot listed here. So, QF, Quest for Glory.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Simon the Sorcerer.
Oh, yeah.
Legend of Kyrandia.
Legend of Kyrandia.
Kyrandia. Got it. Full Throttle, Maniac Mansion, and Day of the Tentacle. Well done.
Nice. Yeah, we got some of those.
We did, and let's keep it moving with another test bank question. This is a Pokemon question. Whose PC does the player use for Pokemon management in Red and Blue? I'm going to rely on you for this.
I believe that would be Bill's PC.
Final answer, because I have no idea.
Final answer.
It actually just says Bill.
Bill's PC. I got that one. Don't take this from me.
Okay, I'll give it to you. Here's a great one for the last question. It's a red one, so it's a tough question. Which 1996 Capcom fighter was the first to introduce tag gameplay? Which 1996 Capcom fighter was the first to introduce tag gameplay? Now, Mac, I'm a pretty big fan of Capcom. I'm a pretty big fan of fighters. And in terms of tag gameplay, I'm looking to my right, and I'm looking at my Marvel vs. Capcom arcade 1-up arcade. And I feel like 1996 may have been Marvel vs. Capcom the first one. And I think Marvel vs. Capcom 2 came later. And I'm going to go with the first Marvel vs. Capcom. What do you think, though?
I'm going to go with you. I was feeling that it was probably Marvel vs. Capcom as well. So we'll see if we get scooped by some smaller title that did it before. But I think that's as probable as anything else.
All right, final answer. Oh, my gosh. Okay, so it's a different game that I would have also probably thought of. X-Men vs. Street Fighter. That came before Marvel vs. Capcom, which is fair. I get it. We can't always be right, and that has been our Nerdflex for the week.
All right. Well, now we turn to a little bit of legalese.
Legalese.
I am not a lawyer. I just play one here on a podcast. It is interesting, though, how much of video games, how we experience them, have this sort of strange interface with laws and legalese and legal stuff. We talked about it kind of a little bit with those congressional hearings, but also, of course, we mentioned it wasn't until like 2011, I believe, that video games were considered First Amendment protected speech. Thanks to the Governator. In the roundabout way, he's the one who brought it up. But
just watched Jingle All the Way last week. Shout out to Arnold.
Shout out to Arnold. But we do occasionally talk about lawsuits that are going on right now. But before we talk about the legalese, and it's going to be a quick one, I have a quick reminder that Lena Khan of the FTC worked very hard over the past several years to protect video gamers. And she will be missed when she is inevitably removed from service at the FTC. But in the meantime, some of that good work that Lena Khan did over the past few years, such as the settlement with Fortnite, where Fortnite settled with the FTC for nearly $500 million. Have a listen to episode 251 for more details. And $225 million of those dollars was for selling the data of minors, whereas the $275 million of that was for charging people for things that they didn't want in Fortnite. And if you were impacted by unwanted purchases in Fortnite between January 2017 and September 2022, you just have a few more weeks left to let them know and claim your slice of that pie. So don't get left out. There's money on the table that Fortnite owes people. You should get it back.
Get it.
All right. But let's get to the main event this evening. So this is a brand new suit, Mercante v. Tarzea. Now, I hope I said those names right. I probably didn't, and apologies in advance. But this is an interesting one. The causes of action in this suit are defamation, intimidation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, tortious interference with contract, and stochastic harassment. Some interesting charges, to be sure. Essentially, what it comes down to is a dude by the last name of Tarzea who's being sued by Alison Mercante, who was a editor for a somewhat popular gaming magazine. We've probably heard of it in the past. Kotaku, by the way. She was working for there and claims that this dude, Tarzea, really did everything he could to try and get her fired. Publishing things that he knew was false, convincing other people to harass and harangue, and eventually saying enough false things and directing it at enough people and sock puppeting it through enough people to eventually get her fired from her job at Kotaku. Because at some point in time, anyway, I'll let you have a read of the lawsuit.
Mac, no one's going to read that. No one is going to read that lawsuit. You are the only person who reads full lawsuits, my man. We're not reading that. We have video games to play.
Be that as it may, you should read the lawsuit. I know nobody does it. Yes, I 100% disagree with Mr. Nice Guy. You should. You need to. Because these details are important. The lies go twice around the world before the truth puts on its shoes. And so while we haven't heard from the other side of things, we've just heard from Mercante, what happens is usually you suffer some kind of consequence for lying in a lawsuit. Which is why you should trust those things that you see more so than when just somebody says things, online. I know we all kind of know this. But here's the thing. The claims in this suit are particularly serious, right? And there are screenshots to boot as a part of the lawsuit. And it does seem like reasonable evidence laid out of somebody actively going after someone that they didn't like, who was just trying to report and edit on games. And it sounds familiar. it sounds like something back in the early 2010s. And I just want to caution everybody who's listening that remember that when somebody just makes a whole bunch of accusations, never has anything to back it up, take a minute, take a beat, take a breath, and relax. We know what happened in Gamergate the first time round, and I just don't want to see people queuing it up again. So don't make Gamergate 2.0 happen. Don't listen to somebody like Tarzia, because it seems like this dude's full of it. Instead, take a breath, take a beat, and remember, if somebody makes big, wild claims, don't do something without proof. Where we don't kickstart Kickstarters without a playable demo that shows us that they can bring together the components of the game.
I actually do.
Why?
I actually do.
We should have more than just claims. We should have some kind of evidence before we do anything, and this is no different. So I'll be letting you know how this suit turns up. We'll be keeping an eye on it, but that is just some legalese for today.
That's some legalese, and thank you, Mac, for sharing. It was awesome. Don't read that though.
Read that.
Play some video games.
It's important.
There's some really good video games you could be playing instead. Thank you for tuning in to episode 327 of Two Nerds in a Pod, nerdiest video game podcast in the galaxy. Before we go, we have one last segment called What We've Been Watching and What We've Been Playing. And this may be the last one of the year, because, Mac, next Tuesday is Christmas Eve.
Indeed.
And the Christmas Eve after that the week after that is New Year's Eve. So we'll have to figure something out. But if this ends up being the last episode, y'all are awesome. Mac and chat, what have y'all been watching and what have y'all been
As for watching, Mr. Nice Guy, let's see. I've been watching a lot of Taskmaster. It's nice, relaxed British comedy. Great. Game show. Good stuff. That's most of what I've been watching. What I've been playing, though, I've been playing a lot of Skyrim lately. I beat a few other games, that I think I've mentioned a few weeks back. Finished off Lorelei and the Laser Eyes.
What'd you think about that? That one was up for Indie Game of the Year, I believe.
So I don't know anything about Baltro.
Balatro? Yeah.
Oh, sorry, yeah, Balatro, my bad. I would have I would have said that Lorelei and the Laser Eyes should have won. But I think maybe it was held back slightly by the fact that you have to have a pen and paper. You have to have, additional accessories, if you will, in order to have a ghost of a chance of getting through the game. So, maybe that hurt its chances. But I think Lorelei and the Laser Eyes is a fantastic game. Well worth it. 10 out of 10.
So you been playing that on Steam Deck?
Yeah, I was playing it on Steam Deck. I'm playing Skyrim on my PC, though, because my spouse is enjoying Baldur's Gate 3, a second run-through on my Steam Deck. So, gotta use the PC. But yeah, that's what about you, Mr. Nice Guy? What have you been watching and playing?
So, probably the main game I've been playing lately, and like I said, I took a trip to Seattle, and I found the perfect game for the flight and for some time while I was relaxing there, and that game is Animal. It is phenomenal. And it's one of those games where if you're going to play it, don't read about it, don't go on Reddit, just play the game. And then after you're done, and by the way, this is actually from the dev. Single dev, solo dev.
Nice.
7 years in development. Game comes out. Full disclosure, tried to get some codes to review on the pod, didn't get them, but wanted to support this anyway, so I purchased a copy. And he basically said on his webpage, play the game blind, get as much done as you can, and then afterwards go hang out with the community on Reddit, on the internet, on YouTube, whatever, and see what other secrets people have discovered. And so I will leave it at that. I think that if you like Metroidvanias, that's a must play. As far as watched a few episodes of Atlanta. Hilarious show, if you didn't know.
Childish Gambino, right?
Yeah, Childish Gambino, Donald Glover, really, really funny stuff, and still doing the Marvel run through, and that's it, Mac. Would you take us home, my good man?
Absolutely. Thanks everybody for coming out to the show and helping to make episode 327 what it was. We wish you luck in identifying that sound test, and we hope to see you most Tuesdays at 7:30 p.m. Mountain Time, 9:30 p.m. Pacific Time, at least lately.
Time zones.
Time zones. Here at twitch.tv/2nerdsinapod, where we live record the show, and of course on whatever podcast platform you listen to at home. Thanks for being here. You're awesome. Be excellent to each other and keep it nerdy. Bye.
Deuces. Happy holidays.